Hello and welcome to Global Lens. Over the next 30 minutes, we put the spotlight on all the top stories from around the world. I'm Parikshit Luthra. These are the top global headlines we're tracking. India and the UK sign a free trade agreement. Average tariffs to be reduced from 15% to 3%. Tariffs removed on nearly 99% of goods and services traded between both nations. Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Starmer say the deal will boost bilateral trade by $35 billion annually. Alphabet earnings tops expectations. The tech giant announces it would hike capital investments by $10 billion this year. Backlash against Elon Musk in Europe hurts Tesla. The EV giant reports its biggest quarterly revenue decline in more than a decade. Musk warns of a few rough quarters going forward. More people die of starvation in Gaza in the last 24 hours, taking the overall death toll due to famine at 113. Israeli strikes killed 77 people in the last 24 hours, including 25 people awaiting food assistance. Let's start with the market action. Wall Street is waiting with bated breath as President Trump gears up to make a rare visit to the Federal Reserve later today. He is set to join a previously arranged tour for several White House advisors off the construction site where the Fed is renovating its headquarters. This comes after Trump indicated that Fed Chair Jerome Powell's handling of the renovation could be grounds for firing. A U.S. president has not visited the central bank since 2006. The other key factors moving Wall Street is earnings. Shares of Alphabet are up after a solid quarter, but Tesla shares are down as EV sales continue to disappoint. Shares of IBM are also down as earnings missed expectations. Our top story this evening, the much-awaited India-UK free trade agreement has been signed. It's been in the works for over 3 years, with talks starting in January 2022. United Kingdom has seen 4 prime ministers since then. Prime Minister Narendra Modi says that there may be a swing and a miss, but India will always play with a straight bat. Keir Starmer says that the deal would create over 2,000 British jobs. Commerce ministers of both nations signed the agreement earlier today. The deal is estimated to boost bilateral ties between the two nations by $35 billion and bring down the tariff guardrails to a large extent. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer received Prime Minister Modi at the Chequers House earlier today. During the visit, both the leaders will review bilateral trade ties and discuss issues including technology, investment, climate, defense and migration. As part of the trade deal, India will lower its average tariffs on products from the United Kingdom from 15% to 3%. Products from the UK, including soft drinks, cosmetics, cars, medical devices and Scotch whisky will get cheaper. The deal is also going to unlock access for financial and business services for both nations. How will India benefit from this trade deal? Well, the UK has opened up its market for India's labour-intensive goods, which will include leather, footwear, textiles, engineering goods, fertilizers, chemicals and petrochemicals. Agriculture exports to Britain is also likely to increase by over 20% in the next 3 years. Speaking at a joint press conference, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has said that India and UK are launching the Vision 2035 strategy to work more closely on defence, migration, health, while Prime Minister Narendra Modi said that the Indian security agencies will continue to enhance cooperation and coordination on matters such as extradition of economic offenders.
This is the biggest and most economically significant trade deal that the UK has made since leaving the EU. And I think I can say that it's one of the most comprehensive deals that India has ever done, boosting wages, raising living standards and putting more money in the pockets of working people. It is good for jobs, it is good for business, cutting tariffs and making trade cheaper, quicker and easier.
Those who misuse democratic freedoms to undermine democracy itself must be held account. इकोनॉमिक ऑफेंडर्स के प्रत्यार्पण के विषय पर भी हमारी एजेंसी सहयोग और समन्वय से काम करती रहेगी.
Discuss the significance of the deal is Richard Heal, Chair of the UK-India Business Council. Thank you for being with us, Richard. First of all, explain to us, how does this deal compare with the kind of FTAs UK has already signed with different allies and countries over the last few years?
Well, thank you very much for having me. I think the fundamental point is that this is a much deeper more substantial free trade agreement than we've signed with countries previously, and we're talking about countries such as Japan, such as New Zealand, Australia, and indeed even the United States. They are transactions or agreements which are, if you like, based on much less in terms of substance than the ambition that underlines and underscores the free trade agreement between India and the UK. And I would point to the fact that, you know, it is based on a very strong existing relationship between the fifth largest economy in the world and the sixth largest economy in the world. The FDI that is invested by Indian companies in the UK is very high. Lots of large Indian companies here. And likewise, UK companies are heavily invested in India. So what it is doing is strengthening the existing relationship.
Right. Richard, I'd like to ask you about financial services and the insurance sector. Are we likely to see more investments as a result of this trade agreement? And the UK Prime Minister's office spoke about how this FTA gives locked-in access and binding investment caps to the financial services and the insurance sector. Could you give us a sense of how this would help?
Yeah, I mean, already we are seeing increased levels of interest and investment between the UK and India in financial services. And Prudential has made some significant investments in India recently and within the past few months. And I think that is probably in anticipation of the changes that have been coming through in the relevant chapters. At the same time, I mean, Minister Sitaraman was in London a few months ago, and I attended the India-UK Financial Partnership meeting, which has overlaps with the FTA in the financial services area. And there you are seeing significant areas such as asset management and green finance, which underpins infrastructure. You know, those are areas that both the Chancellor and the Finance Minister want to develop. So I think, yes, I think that the FTA will catalyse further investment. But at the same time, there has been investment already in anticipation of the FTA.
Right. I'd like to ask you about mobility. As you go through the fine print, would you say that there would now be more visas available, more quotas for Indian professionals looking to move to the UK to work and vice versa?
Well, there is an element of what they call the DCC, or the social agreement within the alongside the FTA. And it involves obviously not paying tax twice or social security twice for temporary visas from professionals, and it's a 3-year moratorium, if you like. The fact of the matter is that there is no increase in the number of visas under the temporary arrangement, but these are an extension, nonetheless, of existing of new arrangements, which make it more attractive for Indian companies and indeed UK companies to bring their professionals into the UK. So from that point of view, I think it is a very positive adjustment.
Right. Is the UK industry satisfied with the kind of arrangement that the auto sector has got? From what we read, the tariffs are going to come down in India from 110 to 10% over a 10-year period in a phased manner. On electric vehicles, the tariffs will start coming down from the 6th year from now onwards, from the implementation of the FTA. In the UK, we see from the charts that have been given to us by the Indian government that the tariffs will come down to 0. So would you say that it's currently, if we were to export cars to the UK, that would happen at 0 duty?
Well, I think there are two elements here. I mean, the first is, as you rightly say, the EV, but also the luxury cars that come in from the UK. No doubt, we're talking about Jaguar Land Rover, and we're talking about other cars of that, if you like, that luxury quality, where tariffs will come down under quotas. So I think that that is a positive. I think that it is encouraging as far as manufacturing is concerned here. I also believe that it is a positive such that auto components for items that are made or that are manufactured in India are also included within the free trade agreement. So taken as a whole, if you're asking me whether the UK companies are pleased, I'm sure that they would like more. But nonetheless, I think overall, it's a very positive step in terms of collaborating between our two countries.
Right. And which UK industries, according to you, are the biggest gainers out of this? Scotch whisky, there was a big demand to bring down tariffs. And currently, the tariffs come down to about 75% immediately, and then they would come down further?
Yes, the trajectory is, as you rightly say, a 50% reduction to 75%, and then subsequently a further 50% to 40% tariffs in the future. I think that there is considerable interest in terms of premium bottled premium whiskey coming in, and I think that will certainly be welcomed both by the Scotch industry here, but also by Indian consumers. At the same time, I'm very well aware that 79% of Scotch that is actually imported into India is in bulk form. And that is then used to, if you like, to stimulate and catalyze the domestic production, which will directly impact and positively as far as Indian industry and Indian workers are concerned. So I think it's a win-win situation. Obviously, the Scotch that comes in bottle form benefits in Scotland, the manufacturers, but also the consumers in India. And the domestic manufacturing, along with technology transfer, will benefit consumers in India as well as industry in India.
Right. My final question would be, are there any areas where you expect a higher amount of investments now with the FTA in place?
Well, I think one of the key areas which maybe doesn't particularly impact, I mean, there are two areas actually, if I think about it. One is in defense and aerospace, and particularly in relation to the technology side of defense and aerospace. And I'm thinking about systems within systems. I'm thinking about AI. I'm thinking about cybersecurity. These are areas where there is already a lot of collaboration, but I think that the if you like, the strategic cooperation that underpins the FTA will cause greater activity between our two nations in that specific area. So, and another area which I feel is critically important, and we'll see stimulus and investment, and we're already seeing investment, is in education. And what I mean by that, we're seeing the announcement, starting to see the announcement of UK higher education and indeed schools saying they're going to be setting up campuses in India to bring their content directly to the Indian consumer and Indian population. And I think that also will be a major positive under the FTA. The one thing that I would say as well is that this agreement is, if you like, what I classify as being a floor. It's not a ceiling. So it is all about ease of doing business. It's all about encouraging SMEs and MSMEs of both countries to follow the supply chains of their larger companies and set up in each other's countries. Absolutely fundamental to strengthen the supply chains and the migration between the two countries in order to, if you like, give us economic security in ways that we have not perhaps enjoyed in the past.
All right. Thank you very much, Richard Heal, for joining us on the program, giving us your views on the India-UK FTA.
Thank you very much.
Russian rescue services have found the wreckage of a plane that disappeared about 16 kilometers from its destination in the Far East region of the country. The Angara Airlines plane had 43 passengers and 6 crew on board. There are reportedly no survivors. The burning wreckage was found in a forest near the destination airport after the flight vanished from radar during a second landing attempt. The third round of peace talks between Russia and Ukraine ended without progress on a ceasefire. However, both sides agreed to continue prisoner swaps. Meanwhile, the Kremlin confirmed that Russian forces are advancing to establish buffer zones along the border as the conflict enters its fourth year, with intense fighting still underway. Israeli forces have continued to bombard Gaza, killing at least 77 people, including 25 aid seekers in the last 24 hours. Hospitals officials have said that at least 113 people have died from famine and malnutrition in the last 24 hours. Hamas has said it has submitted its response to a proposed Gaza ceasefire deal to mediators. Meanwhile, speaking at the UN, India has called for a ceasefire in Gaza.
Today's meeting takes place against the backdrop of a persisting humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Intermittent pauses and hostilities are not enough to address the scale of humanitarian challenges confronting the people who grapple daily with acute shortages of food and fuel, inadequate medical services, and lack of access to education. The health and education situation is particularly troubling. The WHO estimates that around 95% of all hospitals in Gaza are damaged or destroyed. The Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights reports that more than 650,000 children have had no schooling for over 20 months.
US President Trump has told US tech companies to put America first. He said that the days of companies reaping the blessing of American freedom while building factories in China and hiring workers in India are over. He added that the American tech industry's pursuit of radical globalism betrayed millions in the United States.
Many of our largest tech companies have reaped the blessings of American freedom while building their factories in China, hiring workers in India, and slashing profits in Ireland. You know that? All the while dismissing and even censoring their fellow citizens right here at home. Under President Trump, those days are over. We need U.S. technology companies to be all in for America. We want you to put America first. You have to do that. That's all we ask.
Time for a short break, but don't go anywhere. China and the European Union hold a summit in Beijing. Europe's Commission President von der Leyen says ties between the two nations are at an inflection point. President Xi calls for pragmatism amid fraught ties. We discussed this with Tianchen Xu, senior economist at Economist Intelligence. Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens. China and the European Union kicked off a summit in Beijing, marking 50 years of bilateral relations. The summit comes amid strained trade relations and the Ukraine war. Chinese President Xi Jinping vowed to deepen ties with the European Union but warned the bloc to make correct strategic choices. The European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, too, was very stern. She urged the Chinese leader to address the rising trade imbalance between the two major economies. European Union's trade deficit with China ballooned to a historic $360 billion last year. The European Union is China's largest trading partner, while China is the European Union's third. The bloc has raised tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles last year to protect its domestic industry. The move led to Beijing launching anti-dumping probes into European brandy, dairy, pork. China's stance on the Ukraine war have also complicated relations between the two. The European Union wants China to do more in bringing Russia to the negotiating table over the Ukraine conflict. Bilateral trade ties are crucial as EU still awaits a trade deal with the US, and China is on the same boat. Last month, US and China had agreed to de-escalate tensions. China allowed export of rare earth magnets, while US agreed to ease curbs on chip exports to China. However, a complete trade deal is yet to be agreed upon. Let's listen in to what the European Union Commission President said at the summit.
Europe has always believed in the power of free trade to drive prosperity, and that competition has to be fair. We know that our trade relationship today needs more balance. Rebalancing is a necessity, and it is also in the interest of a stronger relationship between us.
Joining us now to discuss this is Tianchen Xu, Senior Economist at Economist Intelligence. He's joining us from China. Thank you very much, Tianchen, for joining us. There was a lot of tension in the room, especially with China refusing for a summit longer than a day. They did not want the summit to take place in Brussels, but in Beijing itself. So how do you describe the takeaways, the mood in the room as this summit happened?
Yeah, I think everybody knows expectations are low ahead of the meeting. Yeah, and you talk about that the meeting was being shortened to 1 day instead of 2 days. Yeah, but I think that is a result of some EU actions, namely that they don't want to, let's say, they're sort of holding back on their willingness to attend some ceremonies in the Chinese city of Hefei. Yeah, and of course, the EU-China economic dialogue right before the summit has been cancelled. Yeah, so I think the mood is still very, let's say, restrained. Yeah, despite some hopes for let's say breaking ice on China-EU relations. Yeah, but I would say the two sides still managed to reach some consensus. Yeah, which should help stabilize bilateral ties. Yeah, for example, even Ursula von der Leyen, who is a pretty hardline on China, admits that China-EU cooperation has become deeper. Yeah, and I think both sides expressed the idea that they don't want decoupling. Yeah, so and I think that for both the EU and China, they have ongoing trade conflicts with the US, and as a result, they cannot afford to fall out with another major trade player. Yeah, so I think this will, let's say, prevent the bilateral ties from worsening further. Yeah, because of the, let's say, the very drastic consequences. Yeah.
Right. Chinese President Xi Jinping has told European Union officials that we must properly handle differences and frictions. And he criticized Brussels' recent trade actions against Beijing. What is Xi Jinping's and China's key expectations from the European Union to put the relationship at least on a stable track?
Yeah, I think, China's intention is to have the Europe drop its many anti-dumping or other trade protectionist cases against China. So you have already talked about the tariffs on Chinese EVs last year. Yeah, and right now we're having some other measures against Chinese e-commerce goods, yeah, and some other chemical materials, yeah, and so on. So I think the battleground is ever expanding, yeah, and this needs to be stopped, yeah, before the two sides can move to a more, say, constructive relations.
Right. The European Union also made some strong statements against China, and they said that European Union goods should have fair market access. There should not be any kind of barriers imposed on European Union goods and companies in the Chinese market. How do you think China is likely to respond to these demands being made by Ursula von der Leyen and the European Union?
Yeah, because I'm in Beijing, I have heard of many, let's say, concerns raised by the EU chamber, for example, and of course by EU businesses. Yeah, and I have been hearing about those complaints since, I would say, many years ago. Yeah, and but I believe that China has been making some progress in, let's say, opening up its market access to European producers. Yeah, for example, in the past, goods produced by European companies in China are not classified as local products in the eyes of the Chinese government. Yeah, but now the Chinese government has made a change. Yeah, so that they try to treat all those products produced in China, equally. Yeah, so I think changes are gradually happening. Yeah, but probably not at a pace that or fast enough to meet the European demands.
Right. Do you feel that due to constant tensions and uncertainties with the US, the European Union and China will come to some sort of understanding on trade and the economic partnership?
Yeah, I think in the end, something will happen. Yeah, we're still at a low point in terms of the bilateral trade relations. Yeah, because China has been sending some goodwill. Yeah, but there are a lot of people that are sort of hotline against China in the EU leadership. Yeah, and I think that needs to be changed. Yeah, so. Yeah, but I think in the end, both sides will recognize the need that you really need to, let's say, improve ties. Yeah, because you are fighting another trade war with the US at the same time. Yeah, and you need to, let's say, give some concessions to each other. Yeah, so probably in the end, we're going to see that the EU is probably allowing more Chinese investments. Yeah, and China is opening up more of its markets to EU businesses. Yeah, so I think in the medium term, I'm still optimistic about the direction of travel.
Right. When it comes to rare earth magnets, is China likely to lift the curbs on rare earth exports to Europe completely?
I think it is already happening if you look at the June trade data release from China. Yeah, so that is recovering. Yeah, but it is not the same level as it was 1 year ago. Yeah, so that is gradually happening, gradually recovering as China relax its curbs. Yeah, but I would like to say that there will remain some sort of licensing approvals, and that is probably a months-long process. Yeah, and the businesses will need to be aware of that. Yeah, and I think also right now everybody knows that China has a very powerful weapon of rare earth export controls. Yeah, and you cannot rule out the possibility that China will use them again. Yeah, in case of let's say escalation in tensions.
Right. And finally, how connected do you think Europe and China will remain despite the trade tensions? Are you going to see a decline in trade between EU and China, or will there be an uptick, is what you foresee in 2025 and 2026?
Yeah, I actually don't see the possibility of declines. Yeah, so even if the tensions are quite elevated this year, China's exports to the EU is still rising. Yeah, and the growth is still very quick. Yeah, and I also said before that even von der Leyen, who is sort of a critic to China, admitted that China-EU cooperation has deepened. Yeah, although with rising trade imbalances. Yeah, so I think this will not change the overall path of China-EU economic relations. Yeah, but of course there will be some thorny issues to be sorted out.
All right. Thank you very much, Tianchen, for joining us with your perspective on the EU-China summit in Beijing. Clearly, there was tension in the room, and both sides laying down ground rules as far as the future partnership on trade and the economic partnership goes. So let's see how things roll and develop here on, especially with the US tariff structures as well. On Final Cut this evening, more than 10 people, including several civilians, have been killed in clashes between Thai and Cambodian troops. The fighting is reportedly ongoing in several locations along their shared border. Thailand's military has said that Cambodian troops opened fire first with heavy weapons. However, Cambodia's defense ministry reiterated that its troops acted in self-defense after coming under attack. We leave you with these visuals. That's all for today on Global Lens. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.
Heavy artillery was fired into the Thai military base and continued throughout the morning. The attacks also targeted Thai civilian areas, including a hospital, resulting in civilian casualties and fatalities.